0.21. So for all intents and purposes, they are supposed to be trying to break 14 minutes here. It's a 15-strong field. Georgia Griffith, the Australian, is another of the two pacemakers. I can tell you that if they're going to break the world record, they need to average 67.2 per lap, 248 per kilometre. It's fairly straightforward maths to get down to 1 minute under 3 minutes per kilometre for the full distance. So are they going to go for it or not? Steve and I were talking a little while ago about how when there's a bit of rain around, there's more oxygen density in the air. We shall see if that proves to be the case. There was a pretty quick 3,000 metres for men in the pre-events before we came on air. But Katie Snowden hits the front, Griffiths slots into second, and as expected, Beatrice Chebet there slots into third. Tanaka of Japan, who's had a wonderful season, holds the Japanese record for 1,500 metres, back in about fifth, sixth now, as that gap has grown very quickly. After a couple hundred metres, it was 6 or 8 metres. And Katie Snowden, Steve, I don't know how many times she's been a pacemaker in the past. She's done a bit of coaching herself. Remember, 8th in that 1,500 metres last year in Budapest. She is a 3:56 1,500 metre runner now. But this is quick, and they really can't afford to vary far off that average tempo of 67.2 per lap.
Well, I think this is it's a tall order, the best of times, Tim. It's Chebet's first race since the incredible Olympic Games for her. You saw it, you mentioned that there was a bit of a gap, Ejike Taye, using her experience to quickly close that gap. But if she's going to do it or run even quick, Tim, it's going to be a solo effort. If you think that Griffiths has been asked to go to 3,008.24 type of pace, that's a personal best. You know,
well, Chebet 67.4 there at 400 metres. The pacemaking absolutely spot on. If Katie Snowden has never been a pacemaker before, she might be running herself into a job here, a regular job. 67 exactly she was at 400 metres. There you are, 67.6 for that lap to 600 metres. She's doing a superb job as that pacer.
So Mahuchik all clear at 196, nobody else cleared at that height. She decided to put the bar up to 2-1, had a couple of attempts. Not, to be honest, great attempts. She was rushing to go through, decided enough was enough. They'd had an evening of atrocious conditions to contend with in the women's high jump. Once the track event started going, it was going to be even more difficult. So competition won, bit of a gamble, paid off for her, cleared 196. Having struggled at 193, only one to go clear at that height. So once again, Mahuchik takes a victory as expected, but perhaps for all of them, a night to say, okay, we're done, get off, get dry. Sam Kendricks in the pole vault. Again, tricky conditions for the men. Many of them going out at early heights. We saw one Olympic medalist go, but not this one. Sam Kendricks in such incredible form, a couple of times over 6 meters recently, hasn't done that for quite a while. Great to see him vaulting so well, such a character, Kendricks. Clear at 5:82. So Kendricks continuing what's been an incredible 2024 for him, back on the rostrum at the Olympic Games. Very difficult conditions for the vaulters tonight. So Kendricks clear. Everybody else, as you can see there, all of the men struggling at heights which they would normally clear fairly straightforwardly. Well, for Mondo Duplantis, anything under 6 meters always looks very easy. So 5:82. Over he goes. Great fun last night. If you weren't aware of it, the 100-meter challenge between himself and Carsten Warholm, 10:37 he ran, which was very quick indeed, and impressive the way he ran it. No wonder he could generate such good speed on the runway as well. Controls it though, look at this. Real height there, estimated at 6:11. But it might not be a night for world records. Set a world record in the Olympic final, as we all know, and then followed that up in Poland in the Diamond League with another centimetre, 6:26. So 5:82, done and dusted, only him and Kendricks clear at that height.
Well, Beatrice Chebet must have been building for this psychologically for some weeks. She's in second place now. The first pacemaker, Katie Snowden, dropped out after 3.5 laps. They got to 3 laps in 3:22.4, 4 laps in 4:29. So again, another 67 lap there, 67.4 to be precise. And this is where Georgia Griffith has enormous responsibility resting on her shoulders, because as a second pacemaker and getting into this middle section of the race, she needs to try and help Chebet here as far as possible. But that's a 66.6. That's great. Slight acceleration there. Might even build up a little bit of a cushion here. But Chebet looking pretty comfortable for my money, Steve, in second place, with Taye and Tesfaye in third and fourth.
Kendricks live now, 6 meters 2. Both men have passed with 5.92. As I said, they were the only two to clear 82, and thinking, well, okay, we know who's going to win this. Just to come back to your question, Tim, you know, Griffith is doing a great job, and every meter she can stay there and hang on to the lights, she's doing a great job. But this is going to be a lonely run for Chebet. But we've seen her do it. You know, watching in Eugene when she smashed that 10,000 meter record, although she was with Gudaf Sigai for much of that race. But tonight, she's going to have to do it herself pretty much from here, because it looks as though Griffiths is done. Yeah,
Griffiths pulling wide. She's done a marvellous job for a couple of laps almost. At 2,000, they needed to be on 5:36. They were 5:37.2. So I tell you what, Chebet is there or thereabouts. She's keeping up with those green lights at world record tempo, doing a marvellous job. But she's got, well, 7 laps now on her own. Well more than half the race out in front, with Taye in second still.
Olympic silver medalist from Jamaica, Owain Pinnock. Second round of the long jump down the back straight. That's better. Now, nobody's really got to grips with the conditions quite yet so far, but that one was a good effort from Pinnock, improving all of the time. Tentoglu struggling in the first 2 rounds, but that 8:18 for the Jamaican, that takes a decent lead early, and that, on a night like this, is not going to be too far away, I'm pretty sure, at the end. Tentoglu looking on, knows what he's got to do now. Pinnock into the lead.
Well, Chebet here could well be on the way to making history. She comes towards the line with 6 laps to run. She's just past halfway, and she's more or less within a second or two of world record schedule. She's got those green lights to follow. That's her incentive. That's her pacemaker now. The great job done by, first of all, Katie Snowden and Georgie Griffiths for the first 5 laps, the first 2 kilometres. And she was within a second of even pace at 2K. Even pace for the world record. She's light on her feet, she's strong, she's a fast finisher, we know that. Remember, Olympic champion at 10,000. She's had 3 or 4 weeks to freshen up now. This is her first race since the Games in Paris, and she's looking absolutely fine as she cruises round the top bend and has built a lead now of about 40 metres.
You'll know better than anyone, Tim, these are the hard laps. You know, when you get to 2 to go, you can muster something if you're within range, but you've just got to hang on. You've got to hang on to those lights. There they are, by her feet. And she's a diminutive figure in the Karacho Athletics Club, trained by Gabriel Kitsunui, and is in such good form. And you don't get too many chances in your career to do this sort of thing. It's an incredible record. If she gets close on a night like this, it will be remarkable. But those lights are just creeping a little bit ahead of her, Tim.
Well, she was due to get a 3K in 8:24, and listen to this. She was 8:25.7. She's within almost touching distance of that sort of virtual world record figure. Just a few meters in front of her. You can see the green lights. Now, if that gap between the leading green light and her, left of picture, extreme left of picture, grows, then the world record will ease away from her. This 4th kilometre, and you called it right, Steve, the 4th kilometre is the critical kilometre. You shouldn't really be in trouble up to halfway in 3K in a 5,000. You can get past halfway, you should be pretty comfortable. But the 4th kilometre is when you do start to feel it, is when you're beginning to hurt, and yet you've still got a long way to go. You're 4 laps out, 5 laps out. So she's pushing hard here. Those green lights maybe are just beginning to ease slightly further away from her. this next 600 meters or so absolutely critical, because as you said, when she's a couple of laps from home, you can almost smell the finish line and you can really gut it out. But those green lights are just beginning to stretch away a bit.
68.5, Tim, her slowest lap so far. And we can see the evidence of that, as you mentioned, by the lights there. Just now, they were creeping away on the previous lap. Now, all of a sudden, that invisible link you have to something, in this case, the lights, is broken. And then it becomes increasingly difficult. This is a crazy record, really, 14 minutes. You know, that's tough at the best of times. But when we saw her run that 10,000 meter world record in Eugene, that was more of a race, wasn't it, that night? And Sigai was the person who'd actually been set up to break the record, and it wasn't until the last kilometre or two that Chebet really forced on and then took it on. But tonight was always going to be a long, lonely chase, and it looks as though the lights are winning this one.
Well, she's coming to the straight now, and there's an athlete only 100 metres ahead of her. She might end up lapping somebody here. That's how well she's going. Glancing up at the big screen as if to see what's going on behind her. That should be the least of her worries. Her lead is now about 80 metres. And in actual fact, I think Taye has closed a little bit over the last lap or so. I think the world record is easing out of her reach. That was a 69.
Duplantis. Well, we don't have to see this, do we? It's really hard to explain to people. You know, this technical event, wet conditions, nobody wants to get hurt either. And anyway, even for the greats, such as Duplantis, conditions just seem to be getting the better of many of the field events tonight.
Yeah, her last couple of laps, her last 3 laps have been 67, 68, 69. She is tiring here, but she reaches 4K now, 11:19, 16, and she needed 11:12. So it is proving to be an elusive target tonight, unless something miraculous happens these next 2.5 laps. It's been a brave run from Chebet. She's going to win, there's no doubt about that, failing an absolute collapse these last 2 laps. But she comes into the straight. Her lead is probably 70 metres now, something like that. And Steve, her own personal best is 14:05. I think that is going to stay safe as well. Fastest time in the world this year, 14:16, could be the next target. 14:18, excuse me, by Gebre Salama. That was in Eugene at the beginning of the summer.
Yeah, Tim, she'd have to run about 2:10 last 800. That's not going to happen on her own. So, look, she's in incredible shape. What a 2 years she's had. Last year, this year, phenomenal. And she taking that double title, if you like, if you call it a double title, 2 gold medals, 5,000, 10,000, phenomenal running. And yeah, tonight, not a night to really attack something like this. And she's a great racer, and I think she's better when she's against the other greats as well, rather than just going for times like this.
Absolutely right, yeah. I mean, some athletes really are time trialists. They love to have pacemakers and then the wave lights to chase, run against the clock. They don't need competition. Others are great tacticians, as she is, as we saw in Paris. When you think that only 3 other athletes have broken 14:10 in history, and she's going to run something like that here tonight, it has still been a magnificent run from her. She hits the line there. Her last 4 laps have been 67, 68, 69, 70. That was a 69. She's rallied a little bit there on that penultimate lap, but she does indeed lap one of the athletes at the back of the field. But the world record attempt has been a brave one, and up to about 3,000 it was still looking possible. But the clock and the conditions defeating her on this occasion. Ironic, really. A bit like the vertical jumps. The winner always finishes on a failure. Well, she is going to win here in a magnificent time, but she might herself regard it as failure. She comes here fresh as a daisy, we can only assume, Steve, in that first race since the game. But Beatrice Chebet, around the top bend, is rallying. She is accelerating. She has found another gear. It's been a quite fabulous last 300 from this tiny, tiny character. She was so bubbly, full of words, eloquent after her Olympic wins in Paris. Well, this has been a supreme run from her. The gap behind her has now stretched to over 100 metres as she crosses the line. 14:09.53. That's the consolation. It is a world best by some 9 seconds and more here tonight. And it is faster, as I said, than all but 3 athletes in history. Brilliant run from Beatrice Chebet. And strong running coming through for second place there for Taye, 14:28.8. It is a new meeting record for Chebet, of course, as well as a world lead. And I don't think we can chalk that one up as any kind of a failure. Quite a brilliant run from the 24-year-old. And she's getting stronger, Steve. 24, I mean, so many of the top distance runners in history, as we see other athletes